The silent watchers the Stellar Confederation assembly hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its dome reaching toward the twin suns of Nexus Prime. 47 different species had gathered here today, their representatives arranged in a perfect circle that symbolized equality among the stars. At least, that's what the official charter claimed. Ambassador Sarah Chun adjusted her simple gray uniform and watched the heated debate unfold around her. The Vorthak delegation, their reptilian forms towering over most other species, were once again demanding expansion rights into neutral territory. Their leader, War Commander Thex, slammed his massive clawed fist on the speaking podium, causing several smaller species to flinch. The Vorthak Empire requires these systems for our growing population, Thex declared, his voice a deep rumble that made the crystal walls vibrate. We have been patient long enough with the Confederation's bureaucratic delays. Sarah noticed how he emphasized the word patient. Coming from a species that had conquered 12 worlds in the past century, it almost sounded like a threat. She glanced at her tablet, reviewing the files on the disputed systems. 3 inhabited worlds, home to the peaceful Zephyrian people. The Zephyrians were farmers and artists with no military to speak of, perfect targets for Vorthak expansion. The ethereal representative Counselor Vex flickered between visible and invisible as emotion overtook their energy form. The Zephyrian people have rights under Confederation law. They said, their voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Their worlds cannot simply be claimed by force. Vex turned his cold yellow eyes toward the ethereal. Rights, he laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Rights belong to those strong enough to defend them. The Zephyrians are weak. We are strong. This is the natural order. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but kept her expression neutral. This was always the way it went. The strong species pushed, the weak species pleaded, and everyone looked to humanity to find a compromise. She had been doing this dance for 15 years, ever since joining the Confederation diplomatic corps fresh out of university. Perhaps, Sarah spoke up, her voice calm and measured, we could arrange a joint colonization program. The Vorthak could settle uninhabited worlds in the same sector, while the Zephyrians maintain their ancestral homes. Both species would benefit from trade opportunities. The chamber filled with the various sounds of alien approval. Clicks, chirps, harmonic tones, and subsonic rumbles that her universal translator converted into meanings her brain could understand. This was what humans were known for in the galaxy. Finding solutions that worked for everyone, but Thex was not interested in compromise today. Humans, he said, the word dripping with disdain. Always seeking the middle path. Always trying to please everyone. He stepped closer to Sarah's position, his massive frame casting a shadow over her. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, what happens when someone refuses your clever compromises? Sarah looked up at the war commander without fear. She had faced down threats from dozens of species over the years. Humans might not be the physically strongest or most technologically advanced species in the Confederation, but they had earned respect through their diplomatic skills and their willingness to help others. Then we keep talking until we find a solution that works, she replied simply. That's what civilized species do. The chamber erupted in various forms of alien laughter, but not from Thex. His expression had grown darker. Civilized, he repeated, you speak of civilization while your species hides behind words and treaties. When was the last time humanity fought? For anything? When did you last show real strength? Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. There is something different about Thex today, something more dangerous than his usual bluster. Strength comes in many forms, War Commander. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use force. Pretty words, Thex replied. But words will not stop what is coming. The Vorthak Empire has been patient with this Confederation's weakness for too long. We will take what we need, with or without your approval. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Around the chamber, representatives shifted nervously. This wasn't the usual political posturing. This sounded like a declaration of intent. High Counselor Mordan, an ancient being whose species had founded the Confederation 3 centuries ago, spoke with the authority of age. War Commander Thex, you forget yourself. The Confederation Charter specifically prohibits unprovoked aggression against member worlds. Thex turned his attention to the High Counselor, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. The Zephyrians are not yet full members, he said. They are still under probationary status. The Charter's protections do not fully apply. Sarah quickly accessed the legal database through her neural implant. Her heart sank as she confirmed what Thex had said. The Zephyrians had applied for full membership only 2 years ago. The bureaucratic process would take at least another year to complete. A technicality, protested Counselor Vex. The spirit of the law clearly protects all species under Confederation authority. The spirit of law is nothing without the power to enforce it, Vex replied. And this Confederation has grown weak. Soft, led by humans who mistake kindness for strength. Sarah stood up from her position, drawing the attention of the entire assembly. War Commander, I ask you to reconsider. The Zephyrians pose no threat to your empire. They are peaceful people who want only to tend their gardens and create their art. Surely the mighty Vorthak Empire can find room for such neighbors. For a moment, something flickered in Thex's eyes. Sarah had seen it before in negotiations, that moment when even the most aggressive beings could be reached by an appeal to their better nature. But then his expression hardened again. The decision has been made, he said. Vorthak forces will begin colonization of the disputed systems within 1 standard month. Any interference will be considered an act of war. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted protests, demands, and threats. Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Once again, everyone would look to humanity to fix this crisis. Once again, she would have to find a way to make peace where none seemed possible. But as she watched Thex stride from the chamber, his delegation following behind him like a military formation, Sarah felt something else stirring inside her. It was a feeling she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, buried deep beneath years of diplomatic training and peaceful solutions. It was anger. Later that evening, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the human embassy, looking up at the stars scattered across the alien sky. The twin suns had set hours ago, and the night was filled with the soft glow of 3 moons. It should have been peaceful, but her mind was racing with possibilities and contingencies. Rough day. In paradise. Sarah turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb approaching, a steaming cup in each hand. Marcus was the embassy's science attaché, a theoretical physicist who spent most of his time in the research labs buried deep beneath the building. He rarely attended diplomatic functions, preferring the company of equations to politicians. The Vorthak are going to attack the Zephyrian worlds, Sarah said, accepting the offered cup. The liquid inside was coffee, real earth coffee, not the synthetic substitutes most species preferred. It was one of the small luxuries that made serving in distant star systems bearable. Marcus nodded grimly. I heard. The research staff has been monitoring Vorthak military movements for weeks. They're not just posturing this time. Sarah looked at him sharply. You've been watching them? Why didn't anyone tell the diplomatic corps? Because the diplomatic corps always finds a way to talk people out of fighting, Marcus replied. But sometimes, Sarah, talking isn't enough. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to show them you're not afraid to push back. There was something in his tone that made Sarah study his face more carefully. Marcus was usually the most peaceful person she knew, more interested in unraveling the mysteries of quantum mechanics than in politics or warfare. But tonight, there was something different about him. Something harder. What are you saying, Marcus? He was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the stars. Did you know that humanity maintains research stations in 43 star systems? Most species assume we're studying astrophysics, xenobiology, that sort of thing. Aren't we? Marcus smiled, but it wasn't his usual warm expression. Oh, we are. We're studying a lot of things, including some rather interesting applications of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Marcus, what exactly are you working on in those research stations? Before he could answer, Sarah's communicator chimed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, and her face went pale. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive Vorthack fleet massing at the edge of their territory," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. 300 ships. They're not planning to colonize the Zephyrian worlds, Marcus. They're planning to conquer them." Marcus nodded as if he had expected this news. "Then I guess it's time for humanity to stop being quite so diplomatic." Sarah looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Marcus said, his voice taking on a tone she had never heard from him before, "that some of us have been preparing for this day for a very long time. The day when being nice and reasonable and diplomatic wouldn't be enough anymore." He pulled out a small device and activated it. Immediately, Sarah's communicator began receiving dozens of messages from human outposts across the galaxy. Research stations, trade missions, even some colonies she hadn't known existed. All of them reporting the same thing: activation of previously unknown defensive systems. "Marcus," Sarah said slowly, "what have we been building out there?" His smile was cold now, nothing like the gentle scientist she thought she knew. "Insurance, Sarah. Insurance against the day when someone would finally push humanity too far." As if on cue, her communicator chimed again. This message was from Earth itself, from the highest levels of human government. Sarah read it twice before the full meaning sank in. "They're authorizing military intervention," she whispered. "No," Marcus corrected her. "They're authorizing us to stop pretending we're not already the most powerful species in the galaxy. There's a difference." Sarah stared at him, then at the messages flooding her device, then up at the stars where human research stations were suddenly revealing capabilities that no other species had suspected. For the first time in her diplomatic career, she wondered if she really knew her own species at all. In the distance, she could hear the sound of ships launching from the human sections of Nexus Prime spaceports. Not the slow, peaceful vessels usually associated with human diplomatic missions. These ships moved with purpose and power that made the very air vibrate. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity, something that would change everything. The breaking point to attack came at dawn on Zephyr Prime, when the peaceful farming communities were just beginning their daily routines. Sarah Chun watched the live feeds from her embassy office, her coffee growing cold as the horror unfolded on her screens. The Vorthack fleet had dropped out of hyperspace without warning, 300 warships descending on the defenseless Zephyrian worlds like predators upon sheep. The first wave of orbital bombardment targeted the planetary communication arrays, cutting the Zephyrians off from any hope of calling for help. The second wave hit infrastructure, power plants, transportation hubs, anything that might support organized resistance. But there was no resistance to organize. The Zephyrians had no military, no weapons of war, only their gardens and their art and their quiet way of life. "How many?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Marcus Webb stood beside her, his face grim as he monitored multiple data streams. "Initial casualty estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. The Vorthack aren't just conquering, Sarah. They're exterminating." Sarah watched a beautiful crystal city dissolve under plasma fire, its artistic spires melting like ice in the sun. Somewhere in that city had been the Zephyrian gallery of harmonies, where light and sound were woven together into living art that took decades to complete. Centuries of culture gone in minutes. The assembly, she asked. "In emergency session. They're debating whether this constitutes a violation of Confederation law." Marcus's voice carried a bitter edge. "The Vorthack legal team is claiming it's legitimate colonization of unclaimed territory." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Unclaimed territory? There are billions of people down there. Marcus corrected quietly. Past tense is becoming more accurate by the hour. Another screen showed Vorthack ground forces landing in the agricultural districts. Sarah watched Zephyrian families fleeing through fields of grain that their ancestors had tended for thousands of years. The Vorthack soldiers weren't taking prisoners. They weren't even bothering to capture infrastructure intact. This wasn't conquest, it was annihilation. Her communicator buzzed with an incoming message from the assembly. Sarah read it quickly, then threw the device across the room in rage. What? Marcus asked. Motion to condemn Vorthack actions failed to pass. Insufficient support. Sarah's hands were shaking now. 27 species voted for condemnation. 20 voted against or abstained. Not enough for action under Confederation law. Marcus pulled up the voting records on his tablet. Let me guess. All the species currently under Vorthack economic pressure voted against, and the ones too small to risk making enemies abstained. Cowards, Sarah whispered. All of them. They're watching genocide happen and hiding behind bureaucracy. Not all of them, Marcus said. He showed her his screen, which displayed messages from human outposts across the galaxy. 17 different species have privately requested human assistance. They want us to do something about this. Sarah laughed bitterly. Do what? We're diplomats, not warriors. We don't even have a proper military fleet. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then activated his secure communication device. Phoenix Station, this is Dr. Webb. Authentication code Sierra 7 Alpha. Please connect me to Project Shepherd. Sarah stared at him. What's Project Shepherd? Before Marcus could answer, a new voice came through the communicator. It was calm, professional, and utterly unfamiliar to Sarah despite 15 years in the diplomatic service. Dr. Webb, this is Admiral Chun. We've been monitoring the situation. Are you requesting activation? Sarah's blood went cold. Admiral Chun? Marcus, that's my family name. Who is that? Marcus looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. Sarah, I'd like you to meet your older brother, David. He's been rather busy while you've been keeping the peace. The voice on the communicator spoke again. Hello, little sister. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Sarah felt the world spin around her. David, you're supposed to be dead. The mining accident on Titan Station 15 years ago was necessary cover for his real assignment. Marcus explained gently. Sarah, while you've been representing humanity's peaceful face to the galaxy, David has been preparing for the day when being peaceful wouldn't be enough. Admiral David Chen's voice carried a weight of authority that Sarah had never heard in her diplomat circles. The Zephyrian situation has crossed our red line. We're implementing Protocol 7. What's Protocol 7? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The point where humanity stops asking permission and starts giving orders. David replied. Marcus, are your research teams ready? All stations report full operational status. Marcus confirmed. Quantum barriers are in place, temporal anchor points established, and the dimensional fold generators are charging. Sarah stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. You're not a theoretical physicist. Oh, I am, Marcus said with a slight smile, but theory and practice aren't mutually exclusive. Sarah, humanity has been researching some very practical applications of quantum mechanics, the kind that other species would find concerning. Another screen lit up showing Zephyrian refugees trying to escape the planet in civilian transports. Sarah watched in horror as Vorthack fighters began hunting down the fleeing ships, destroying them one by one. Among the refugees were children, artists, teachers, the entire cultural heritage of a peaceful species being erased. That's it, Sarah said, standing up abruptly. I don't care about protocols or politics anymore. We have to do something. We are. David's voice came through the communicator. Marcus, please show Sarah what we've been building while she kept everyone distracted. Marcus activated a holographic display that filled the room. Sarah gasped as she saw a three-dimensional map of human space, but it wasn't the small cluster of colonies she thought she knew. This map showed human outposts in hundreds of star systems connected by energy patterns she didn't recognize. For 3 centuries, Marcus explained, humanity has been the galaxy's mediators. We've helped everyone, asked for little in return, and been careful never to seem threatening. But we've also been learning. Every species we've helped has shared technology with us. Every diplomatic mission has given us knowledge. Every research station has been building something. The display zoomed in on individual systems, showing massive structures hidden in asteroid fields and gas giant clouds. These weren't simple research stations. They were fortresses, weapon platforms, and something else Sarah couldn't identify. "What are those?" she asked, pointing to strange geometric shapes that seemed to bend space around them. "Dimensional anchors," Marcus said casually. "They let us deploy forces anywhere in the galaxy instantly. The Vorthack fleet thinks they're attacking helpless farmers. They're about to discover they're actually attacking humanity's oldest friends under humanity's protection." Sarah's communicator suddenly came alive with emergency signals from the Zephyrian system. But these weren't distress calls. They were reports of unknown ships appearing throughout the system, ships that matched no known design in any galactic database. "David," Sarah said into the communicator, "what did you do?" "I kept my promise," her brother replied. "The promise humanity made to every species we've ever helped. We will protect you, even if it means revealing what we really are." The main display switched to live feeds from the Zephyrian system. Sarah watched in amazement as sleek human vessels materialized from nowhere, their hull designs unlike anything she'd seen before. They moved with impossible grace, phasing through solid matter and appearing behind Vorthack ships before the enemy could react. "How?" Sarah whispered. "Quantum phase shifting," Marcus explained. "We don't travel through space, we step outside it temporarily. The Vorthack sensors can't track what doesn't exist in their dimensional framework." The first engagement lasted exactly 17 seconds. A Vorthack dreadnought, pride of their fleet, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, it vanished as if it had never been there at all. "Molecular disintegration field," Marcus noted clinically. "Very precise." The crew had time to realize what was happening, but not time to feel pain. Sarah watched the Vorthack fleet's organized formation dissolve into chaos. Ships that had been methodically destroying a peaceful civilization were now fleeing in panic as their own vessels disappeared around them. But the human ships weren't letting them escape. They appeared wherever the Vorthack tried to run, cutting off every retreat route. "This is impossible," Sarah breathed. "How long have we had this technology?" "We developed the basics during the Arcturus crisis when the hegemony threatened to enslave the Altarian refugees," Marcus said. "But we've been refining it for 60 years. Every time someone threatened a weaker species and looked to humanity for help, we got a little more motivated to ensure we could actually provide that help." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communicator again. "Sarah, I need you to open a channel to the Confederation Assembly. It's time they understood some things about how this galaxy actually works." Sarah activated the emergency diplomatic frequency, her hands shaking as she sent the priority signal. Within minutes, representatives from dozens of species were connected to the channel, their voices creating a chaos of demands and questions. "What is the meaning of this attack on Vorthack forces?" War Commander Thex's voice cut through the noise. "This is an act of war against the Vorthack Empire." Admiral Chen's response was calm and implacable. "War Commander Thex, this is Admiral David Chun of the Human Defense Force. You are hereby notified that the Zephyrian worlds are under human protection. Your forces have 1 hour to withdraw completely from the system." Human Defense Force. High Counselor Mordan's ancient voice wavered with confusion. "There is no such organization in Confederation records." "Because we never needed you to know about it," David replied. "But circumstances have changed. The Confederation has proven incapable of protecting innocent species from aggression. Humanity will no longer rely on diplomatic channels to fulfill our moral obligations." The communication channel exploded with outrage from multiple species. Accusations of human deception, demands for explanations, threats of economic sanctions. Through it all, Admiral Chun remained silent until the noise died down. "The Zephyrian genocide ends now," he said simply. "Any Vorthack forces remaining in the system after 1 hour will be removed. Any species that supports continued Vorthack aggression will find their own military capabilities reevaluated." "You cannot threaten sovereign member states." Thex roared. I'm not threatening anyone, David replied. I'm stating facts. Humanity has been the galaxy's peacekeepers for 3 centuries. That role has now evolved. We will keep the peace, but we will do it our way. Sarah watched the tactical display as Vorthak ships tried desperately to escape the system. Most made it out, but not all. The ones that continued attacking Zephyrian settlements simply vanished, their crews transported to detention facilities that apparently existed in dimensions Sarah couldn't even imagine. David, she said quietly, what have we become? Her brother's answer came after a long pause. What we always were, Sarah. Protectors. But now everyone else knows it too. The last Vorthak ship disappeared into hyperspace 57 minutes after the ultimatum. The Zephyrian worlds were free, their cities damaged, but their people alive. And the galaxy had just learned that humanity's patience had limits after all. Sarah looked at Marcus, who was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. What happens now? Now, Marcus said, we have some very serious conversations with some very nervous species leaders, because the galaxy just realized that the quiet, helpful humans they've been taking for granted are actually the most dangerous beings in known space. Sarah nodded, still trying to process everything she'd learned. And the Vorthak? Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. The Vorthak Empire is about to discover what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I suspect they won't enjoy the education. In the distance, Sarah could hear the sound of ships launching from human bases across the galaxy. Not research vessels or diplomatic transports this time. These were warships, finally revealing themselves after centuries of hiding in the shadows. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human protection had begun. The new reality 3 months after the Zephyrian liberation, as historians were already calling it, Sarah Chun stood once again in the Confederation Assembly Hall. But everything had changed. The perfect circle of equality had been broken, replaced by a new arrangement that put humanity at the center, with other species arranged in concentric rings based on their level of cooperation with the new order. The Vorthak delegation was notably absent. Their empire had lasted exactly 6 weeks after challenging humanity's protection of the Zephyrians. It hadn't been a war in any traditional sense. One day, the Vorthak Empire controlled 47 star systems. The next day, their entire military simply stopped existing. Their government officials found themselves transported to comfortable but inescapable detention facilities, and their worlds were placed under human administration. Sarah watched as her brother David addressed the assembly. Admiral Chen now wore a simple blue uniform bearing no rank insignia, but his presence commanded more respect than any crown or ceremonial weapon. The assembled alien dignitaries listened with the attention of students before a teacher, or perhaps prey before a predator. The transition period is complete, David announced, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Former Vorthak territories have been reorganized into the Liberated Systems Coalition. Their new governments, elected by their own people, have requested continued human oversight to prevent the return of imperial oppression. Ambassador Kellic of the Altarian Republic raised one of his 6 arms. Admiral Chun, the former Vorthak population. What of them? Sarah watched her brother's face, looking for any sign of the gentle boy she'd grown up with. What she saw instead was someone who had learned to make impossible decisions and live with their consequences. The Vorthak people have been relocated to suitable worlds within their former territory, David replied. They have been given the opportunity to build a new society based on cooperation rather than conquest. Those who refuse this opportunity have been placed in permanent containment. The clinical language didn't disguise what Sarah knew had really happened. The Vorthak military caste had simply vanished overnight, transported to pocket dimensions that Marcus had described as comfortable prisons in folded space. The rest of the Vorthak population had been given a choice, adapt to a peaceful existence or join their former warriors in exile. High Counselor Mordan, looking even more ancient than before, spoke with a voice that shook slightly. Admiral, the Confederation Charter requires that all member species have a voice in the Confederation Charter. David interrupted gently, assumed that all member species would act in good faith to protect the innocent. When that assumption proved false, the charter became obsolete. He gestured to the displays around the chamber, which showed star maps Sarah had never seen before. Human influence extended far beyond what anyone had imagined, reaching into nearly every corner of known space. Humanity has been protecting this galaxy for 3 centuries, David continued. We've prevented 17 genocides, stopped 43 wars before they could begin, and saved countless species from extinction. We did this quietly through diplomacy and humanitarian aid, because we believed in the ideals of cooperation and mutual respect. Sarah noticed how many of the alien representatives were nodding. They remembered the human aid missions, the medical supplies, the technological assistance that had always come freely with no strings attached. But they had never realized it was part of a larger pattern. But some of you mistook our methods for weakness, David said, his tone hardening slightly. You assumed that because we preferred peace, we were incapable of war. The Vorthak learned otherwise. The question now is whether the rest of you will learn from their example or require similar education. Trade, Minister Zila's crystalline form resonated with nervous energy. Admiral, surely you don't intend to impose human rule on the entire galaxy? David smiled, and for a moment Sarah glimpsed the brother she remembered. Minister Zila, we have no interest in ruling anyone. We're interested in protecting everyone. There's a difference. Marcus Webb, now openly acknowledged as Director of Human Strategic Research, stepped forward to activate a new holographic display. What we're implementing is a protection protocol, he explained. Any species that wishes to maintain its sovereignty is free to do so as long as it agrees to 3 simple principles. The display showed the new galactic structure humanity was proposing. It was elegant in its simplicity, terrifying in its implications. First, Marcus continued, no unprovoked aggression against other species. Second, no oppression of weaker populations within. Your own territory. Third, cooperation with human peacekeeping forces when requested. Counselor Vex flickered between visible and invisible as their energy form processed the information. And if a species refuses these principles, then they forfeit the right to participate in galactic civilization. David replied matter-of-factly, we've prepared alternative accommodations for species that prefer conquest to cooperation. Sarah knew what those alternative accommodations were. She had visited one of the pocket dimensions where the former Vorthak military leadership was being held. It was comfortable enough, with artificial environments tailored to their needs, but it was also completely isolated from the main universe. A gilded cage enfolded spacetime. Ambassador PX of the Unified Hives raised a mechanical appendage. Admiral Chun, your species has revealed capabilities that violate known physical laws. How do we know you won't simply decide we're all too dangerous to exist? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah held her breath, wondering how her brother would respond. This was the fear that every species in the galaxy was dealing with. The realization that humanity could erase them as easily as they had the Vorthak military. David was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight of genuine emotion. Ambassador PX, in the 300 years since humanity joined galactic civilization, how many species have we driven to extinction? None. PX replied immediately. But how many species have we enslaved? None, but your capabilities. How many wars have we started for our own benefit? PX's mechanical systems clicked and whirred as he processed the question. None. But the revelation of your true power changes everything. No, David said firmly. It changes nothing about who we are or what we believe. We are still the species that risked our lives to save Altarian refugees. We are still the people who shared our medical technology to stop the Rigelian plague. We are still the civilization that has spent 3 centuries helping others because it was the right thing to do. He gestured to the displays showing human activities across the galaxy. The only thing that has changed is that we're no longer hiding our ability to protect the species we care about, and we care about all of you. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she realized what her brother was really saying. Humanity hadn't become conquerors. They had simply stopped pretending they couldn't enforce their own moral standards on a galactic scale. High Counselor Mordan spoke again, his ancient voice carrying centuries of political experience. And if we accept this new order, what guarantees do we have of our continued autonomy? Marcus stepped forward to answer. The same guarantee you've always had, Counselor. Humanity's word. We have never broken a promise to any species that has cooperated with us in good faith. We won't start now. But if we don't accept, asked Ambassador Kellic. David's expression hardened, then you'll join the Vorthak Empire in learning why humanity has been so successful at preventing wars. We prefer cooperation, but we'll accept submission if necessary. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives considered their options. Sarah watched faces that ranged from fearful to thoughtful to resigned. They were all doing the same calculation. How much independence were they willing to sacrifice for the security that human protection provided? Trade Minister Zila was the first to speak. The commerce worlds formally accept human oversight under the conditions you've outlined. One by one, the other species added their agreement. Some spoke with enthusiasm, recognizing the benefits of a truly protected galaxy. Others spoke with reluctance, understanding that resistance was futile. But all of them spoke. When the last representative had given their consent, David nodded solemnly. Then welcome to the new galactic order. Humanity accepts the responsibility for your protection and the burden of maintaining peace among the stars. Sarah approached her brother after the session ended, finding him on the observation deck where she had first learned the truth about humanity's hidden capabilities. Do you think we did the right thing? She asked, looking out at the stars that now flew under human protection. David was quiet for a moment. Sarah, do you remember what Dad used to say when we were kids? About the price of being strong? Sarah nodded. With great power comes great responsibility. We've always had this power, David said. We've always been the strongest species in the galaxy. The only thing that changed was that we stopped pretending otherwise when innocent people were dying. The other species fear us now. Good, David replied, surprising her. Fear keeps them honest. Fear prevents the strong from oppressing the weak. Fear is what makes bullies think. Twice before picking fights, Sarah considered this, but they also respect us. Better, David said with a slight smile. Respect built on demonstrated capability lasts longer than respect built on good intentions. In the distance, Sarah could see human patrol ships moving through the system, their presence a visible reminder of the new order. They weren't conquering fleets or occupation forces. They were guardians, protectors of a peace that had been bought with the revelation of humanity's true strength. What happens next? Sarah asked. Now, we do what we've always done, David replied. We protect the innocent, help those in need, and work toward a better galaxy for everyone. The only difference is that we won't be asking permission anymore. Marcus joined them on the observation deck, carrying a tablet filled with reports from across human space. The Zephyrians have finished rebuilding their capital city, he announced. They want to name the Central Plaza after humanity. Sarah smiled. What did you tell them? I told them to name it after themselves. Marcus replied. They're the ones who survived. They're the ones who rebuilt. We just made sure they had the chance to do both. As the three humans stood watching the stars, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The galaxy was no longer a collection of competing powers balanced on the edge of chaos. It was a community under protection, guided by species that had learned that true strength meant using power to help others. The Vorthak Empire was gone, but their former subjects were building new lives under human guidance. The weak no longer lived in fear of the strong. The innocent could sleep peacefully knowing that humanity stood watch over their dreams. It wasn't the galaxy that Sarah had imagined when she first became a diplomat. It was better. It was a galaxy where being peaceful didn't mean being helpless, where compassion was backed by the power to enforce justice, and where humanity's greatest strength had finally been revealed. They had always been protectors. Now everyone knew it. And in that knowledge, the galaxy had found something it had never possessed before. True peace, maintained not by the fragile balance of competing powers, but by the unwavering strength of those who refused to let the innocent suffer. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human guardianship had begun. And in the light of distant stars, a new kind of civilization was taking its first steps toward a future where strength served justice and power served peace.